I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable on film. Hi! So, this is Madame Onça, and welcome to Totally Tea and Tarot. We are partway through the sixes, and what we like to do is we talk a little bit about herbal correspondences, and then we walk through a couple different decks and their art, and hammer out the basic meaning, and the whole thing takes about 5 minutes. So, welcome to this. I am the artist and co-author of the World Spirit Tarot, which looks like this. It originally came out by Llewellyn, fairly long time ago now, and then it went out of print and became very, very expensive, and people who weren't me started selling them for hundreds of dollars on the internet. Llewellyn was gracious enough to return the rights to me for publishing, and it is re-released. This is the second edition with this snazzy new back. So here's the World Spirit Tarot. We're also going to touch on the Light and Shadow Tarot and the Shining Tribe. So, but first, herbs. So we use as a guide the Herbal Tarot, which is an old body of work. And interestingly, for some reason, the herb that they selected to relate to this is watermelon. Whereas if you've been following along, it's mostly been things like hawthorn and hops and vervain and by and large, plants that most people don't think about. We think of them, if anything, as weeds. Watermelon is not only a plant that we're all, many of us, I should say, are familiar with, but we don't even think of it often as a plant so much as a fruit. So it being October where I am right now, not a lot of watermelons around, but I did get watermelon kombucha. So watermelon itself is just cooling, soothing, delicious. It makes a lovely sangria, and in the kombucha form, of course, it is a kombucha is a SCOBY. It is the fusion of several different life forms, but basically the kombucha mushroom takes what you give it, the sugars you give it, and transforms it into a tasty liver tonic that is somewhat like fermented and vinegary at the same time. So this is my watermelon kombucha. Yeah. So there you go. I actually love watermelon and kombucha. So, watermelon, who knew? I have to admit I didn't do gobs and scads of research to find out why, of all things, they picked that. Maybe because the Six of Cups is so very watery that they just felt that they needed a melon that was watery too. Now, cups, of course, the element of water, the realm of emotion, to a certain extent, sometimes spirituality and creativity, depending how a person's worldview is constructed. But cups in general refer to that tender, sloshy inner life. And I have always interpreted this, the Six of Cups. You can see that these people are here in this garden. This card is known to me as the Sanctuary of the Familiar. And in fact, for the Rider-Waite-Smith the ardent fans, you'll recognize the walls of this garden. You'll recognize some of the Rider-Waite-Smith in here. So the way I understand this card, traditionally, it suggests that having been through some emotional difficulty, or emotional adventuring, you might say, this card counsels returning to your source, returning to that which feeds you, whether that is familiar routine, whether that is family, familiar haunts, habits that nurture you. It's essentially Stephen Covey's old Sharpen the Saw, but particularly with a sense of place or community. So the Six of Cups, you can see these folks are very, like, they're barefoot, they're kind of off the shoulder. It's intended to be very sort of gender ambiguous. They're having a relaxed, good time. There's bread and fruit and cups, and the suggestion is that whenever they get around to it, they can meet their needs, all their needs. So it's a very relaxed card of, I don't want to say rest and repair, because that puts the focus on whatever they might have been through before. But this is the spa time. This is the chill and restore time. Now, interestingly, in the Light and Shadow, which is generally a deck that I love the art, and I've spoken some about that. They are both, in fact, linoleum blocks. You can see how differently the same tool differently the same medium can be rendered in order to make those bold black and white choices. This one, the way that Brian Williams and Michael Gepford described this, it really sounds to me more like they're talking about the Six of Pentacles, which is, once again, that card about sharing, giving, generosity, giving and receiving. I mean, that to me is really what this picture even looks like. I did a little reading on how they describe this in their book, which is in general a lovely, lovely book. And that's really how they describe it too. So they're sort of jumping over what I think of as a traditional meaning in the sense of emotional restoration after a time of difficulty, a time of duress. But you can see here, I mean, there's this very rigid sort of urban landscape. And yet this person with a spirit of levity in the foreground, there's a sense of giving and receiving. There's herbs, there's flowers, there's just a sense here of like, I want to say restorative or healing engagement. Like this person has clearly gone out of their way and is enjoying this task of sharing and participating. So I would say that while they've taken this card in a different spin from what you might think of as the mainstream, it still has this nice notion of be with people, be with feelings, be with good feelings, focus on positive things, do what you need to do. So lovely art, interesting fine tuning of focus there. And then here we see here Rachel Pollack's treatment in the Shining Tribe, originally known as the Shining Woman. Here we see the Six of Rivers, and I would say this, to me, has more of that feeling of the sanctuary of the familiar. It's almost womb-like. So while the colors of the water are cooling and blue, I believe this other color is referred to in RV paint as ocean mist. So while we have all this sort of cooling oceanic feeling, there is this sense here of sort of being enclosed and like enveloped in the womb. So, and you can see here, instead of calling them cups, she calls them rivers. Sorry, trying to get that close enough. There you go. So the Six of Rivers. So you can see again that Rachel Pollack has made sort of a bold lateral choice in order to stay in touch with the meanings, but find a whole different way to illustrate and communicate. And I will say that if this figure, if these colors, if these rivers, if this is in fact to be considered womb-like, it's almost like this here also speaks to that throughway through the cervix and out the birth canal. It's lovely. So today we get a very sort of mixed bag. We have watermelon with a splash of kombucha. We have Sanctuary of the Familiar with a splash of generosity and just action. And we have this notion of the watery womb and restoration of the self. Unexpected. If you want to talk more, or if you have other information for me, or if you have concerns about my interpretation, I'm happy to talk about it. You are welcome to say something in the comments, or you can also contact me on the internets. I'm at hardestworkingwomaninshowbusiness.com and on Etsy and in Patreon, where I release these videos and more. So come and say hi. Blessed be.